A tomahawk flies, a monkey attacks, a huge star bombs. Johnny Carson's Tonight Show was the definition of anything can happen. He was famous for his cool, but sometimes that cool just shattered. We're looking at 16 unbelievable moments that proved live TV is a hazard. Most were hilarious, but one was a disaster. The crazy part is, the incident at number 11 caused a massive backlash that nearly ended Carson's 30-year run, and it's not the one you think. 1. When Ed Ames aimed low. It started as a simple demonstration. It was April 1965, and actor Ed Ames, famous for playing Mingo on Daniel Boone, came on the show. He was there to show off his character's tomahawk throwing skills. So here's the deal. The segment began normally. Ames explained the proper technique while Carson listened. They brought out a wooden silhouette of a cowboy as a target, and Ames got ready to throw. What happened next became television history. Ames threw the tomahawk with decent power, but his aim was interesting. It landed squarely in the wooden figure's crotch. The studio audience just erupted. But it was Carson's reaction that made it one of TV's most iconic moments. A director who was in the control room that night recalled that Johnny completely lost it. They had seen him laugh before, but never like this. He was doubled over with tears streaming down his face, completely unable to speak. The crazy part is, Carson's laughing fit lasted for nearly 3 full minutes, which is an eternity in live TV. It's still believed to be the longest sustained laugh in Tonight Show history. When he finally caught his breath, he just quipped that he didn't even know Ames was Jewish. But a broken prop is one thing. What about breaking Carson's personal stuff? 2. Rickles and the broken box. Johnny Carson was known for being very neat about his set. Every item on his desk had its place, including a wooden cigarette box that was a personal treasure to the host. What most people don't realize is that the box was a gift from his second wife, Joanne, which made it even more special. So when Don Rickles guest hosted in October 1973 and accidentally broke that box, he knew he was in big trouble. The next night, Carson came back and mentioned the broken box on air. He showed the audience the damage and promised he'd get Rickles back. But nobody, especially Rickles, could have guessed what he would do. A few months later, Carson found out Rickles was filming his sitcom CPO Sharky on a nearby NBC soundstage. In a move nobody had ever seen before, Carson decided to interrupt the live taping of Rickles' show with his own cameras following him. A producer said it was completely unplanned. Johnny just looked at them during a break and said they should go over there. The crew grabbed their gear and literally ran across the studio lot. Johnny burst onto Rickles' set while they were in the middle of a scene. Rickles, in his Navy uniform, looked genuinely shocked as Carson stormed in, demanding to know why he broke his box. Rickles may have made Carson mad, but the next guest made him openly weep. 3. The song that made Johnny cry. As Johnny Carson's 30-year run on The Tonight Show was ending in May 1992, the final episodes got very emotional. And that's putting it lightly. The second-to-last show had Robin Williams and Bette Midler. Everyone expected it to be funny, but nobody was ready for the powerful moment that would become one of Carson's most famous farewells. Near the end of the show, Midler, who had been joking with Carson all night, suddenly changed the mood. She said she wanted to sing something special just for him. She began a soft, tender version of One for My Baby and One More for the Road, a classic song about last calls and saying goodbye. As Midler sang right to him, the camera caught something amazing. Johnny Carson, the most controlled man on TV, had tears welling up in his eyes. A sound engineer said you could have heard a pin drop. Everyone knew they were seeing something incredibly private. Johnny wasn't just being vulnerable on camera, he was saying goodbye to 30 years of his life. The wall came down. When Midler finished, Carson leaned over and kissed her hand. It was an amazing moment. The crazy part is, Bette Midler was Carson's final scheduled guest, ever. From tears of sadness to tears of pure panic, when an animal got way too close. 4. The monkey on the king's head. In 1979, animal handler Joanne Steele's Capuchin monkey, Zippy, got unpredictable. It suddenly launched itself right onto Johnny Carson's head. A camera operator said it was using Johnny's perfect hair as a jungle gym. What made it legendary was Carson's reaction. He just sat there with a look of total deadpan disbelief. A makeup artist confirmed Johnny's hair was sacred, which made the moment comedy gold. But an animal on the head is one thing, the next guest's entire act was just weird. 5. Steve Martin's bizarre magic. In 1980, Steve Martin, already known for anti-comedy, did a magic act as the Great Fly Dini. He pretended to unzip his pants and pull out an egg, a salt shaker, a ringing phone, and finally a tiny fake hand. A writer on the show said Carson started as a straight man, but was soon doubled over, genuinely losing it. The act was so baffling that the network got complaints from viewers asking if Martin was having a breakdown. Martin was weirdly brilliant, but the next guest was pure, unfiltered energy. 6. Robin Williams breaks the format. When Robin Williams appeared, the show's format went out the window. A writer said Johnny compared interviewing him to catching lightning in a bottle. In one appearance, Williams launched into impressions, jumped out of his chair, and used the desk as a stage. Producers would panic, but Johnny knew to just let go. They often added extra commercial breaks just to let the crew catch their breath. But Williams's chaos was friendly. The next guest brought some real tense energy. 7. Rickles roasts a legend. When Frank Sinatra was on in 1976, most comedians were terrified to joke about him. Not Don Rickles. With Sinatra sitting right next to him, Rickles launched a full roast, calling him overrated. A producer confirmed the tension was real and Carson was visibly nervous. To everyone's relief, Sinatra finally burst out laughing. They became close friends, all because Rickles had the nerve. Rickles roasting Sinatra was risky, but Carson's next comment was a risk of a different kind. 8. Dolly Parton and the infamous line. During a 1977 interview, Johnny Carson and Dolly Parton were bantering when he made his infamous remark. Looking at her outfit, Carson said he would give a year of his life to peek under that blouse. The audience let out a mix of gasps and laughter. That one comment generated more viewer mail, both complaints and support, than almost any other moment. Dolly, a total pro, just laughed it off. That comment was awkward, but the next guest's entire segment was just painful. 9. The legend who bombed. By the 1980s, Bob Hope's appearances were painful. He would come on and read dated jokes from cue cards, totally disconnected from the audience. A writer said Johnny dreaded these segments. It was uncomfortable watching Carson have to pretend the material was working. He would even do his famous tie-loosening gesture, his secret on-air signal to Ed McMahon that the segment was dying. Hope's segment was painfully unfunny, but the next guest brought unexpected real emotion. 10. The poem that silenced a nation. In 1981, Jimmy Stewart came on and read a poem he'd written about his dog, B.O., who had passed away. It wasn't a light poem. It was a powerful story about love and loss. As Stewart finished, his voice cracking, the camera cut to Carson. He was openly crying. A director confirmed these were real tears. Johnny was so genuinely moved he was completely speechless on air for almost a full minute, from a touching animal story to a terrifying one. This next one was the big one. 11. The crisis that almost canceled the show. Joan Embry from the San Diego Zoo brought a massive Burmese python that got loose in the late 70s. The 50-pound snake slithered off the desk, making Johnny leap from his chair in terror. But then it got serious. The snake vanished under the set and the crew couldn't find it. They cut to an emergency commercial break as stagehands ripped up floor panels. Network executives freaked out, threatening to ban all animal segments or even pull the show for safety violations. It was a massive crisis, and Johnny had to personally fight to save the program. A lost python caused a crisis. But the next guest intentionally broke the rules. 12. George Carlin's secret jab. George Carlin was famous for pushing boundaries, especially with his 7 words routine. During a 1983 appearance, he delivered a monologue that seemed innocent but contained a clever jab at network censorship. The joke was so subtle that the standards department missed it, but Carson didn't. A writer confirmed Johnny caught the jab. His small, knowing smile and glance at the camera showed he respected Carlin for finding a creative way to beat the system. Carlin was subtly rebellious. The next guest was, well, not subtle at all. 13. Dean Martin's legendary drunk act. Dean Martin had built his entire public image around being the charming, slightly buzzed performer who could deliver a perfect joke while seeming totally relaxed. This carefully crafted character made him one of the biggest stars in the world and a frequent guest on The Tonight Show. During one very memorable appearance in the 1970s, Martin seemed to be leaning extra hard into his tipsy persona. He was slurring his words, he fumbled with his cigarette, and he even famously missed his chair when he tried to sit down, almost ending up on the floor. The audience was eating it up. What made the appearance so great was Carson's response. He didn't try to rein Martin in. He basically became Martin's straight man, setting him up to deliver even more outrageous, rambling responses. The segment dominated, but what most people don't realize is it was almost entirely an act. His son later confirmed that Martin was a very disciplined performer and that the liquid in his glass on stage was almost always apple juice. Dean Martin pretended to be out of control. The next guy really was. 14. The monologue ambush. One of the most predictable and sacred parts of The Tonight Show was its format. Carson's nightly monologue was a TV institution. This rigid schedule made it all the more shocking when one night in the early 80s, the monologue was interrupted in a big way. Carson had just started his jokes when Don Rickles, who was scheduled to be on later in the show, started heckling him, loudly. From backstage, the audience was confused at first, but then they recognized that famous, insulting voice. Carson, thrown off for a second, paused his joke. Then, instead of trying to ignore it, he did something totally unexpected. He broke character, turned toward the curtain, and just yelled for Don to get out there. A stage manager confirmed this was not planned at all. Guests were supposed to wait quietly. Johnny stopping his own monologue was unheard of. Rickles came bounding out, acting innocent, but was clearly thrilled to have completely messed up the show's routine. Rickles' interruption was a surprise, but the next guest gave a surprise performance. 15. The Impression Masterclass. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most multi-talented entertainers in history. A singer, a dancer, an actor, a comedian, he could do it all. This made him a frequent and beloved guest on The Tonight Show. During one amazing appearance in the 1970s, a casual conversation about other entertainers suddenly turned into an incredible display of Davis's skills. He just launched into a series of rapid-fire impressions that left Carson and the audience speechless. In less than 1 minute, Davis seamlessly changed into Frank Sinatra, then Jerry Lewis, then Nat King Cole, then Jimmy Stewart. And get this, it wasn't just their voices. He captured their physical tics, their posture, and their mannerisms with scary accuracy. This wasn't a planned bit, it just happened. A camera operator said Johnny was literally clutching his stomach, laughing. This wasn't his polite guest laugh, this was genuine, helpless laughter. He was as entertained as the audience. Sammy Davis Jr. showed his raw talent. The final guest showed his weird sense of humor. 16. Arnold's German prank. By the mid-1980s, Arnold Schwarzenegger had gone from bodybuilding champ to one of the biggest Hollywood action stars on the planet. He came on The Tonight Show to promote his new movie. These appearances usually followed a very predictable script, but Arnold decided to have some fun. When Carson asked his first question, Schwarzenegger responded with a long, detailed, and very serious-sounding answer, completely in German. Carson and most of the audience could not understand a single word. As Arnold continued to speak earnestly in German, Carson's confusion looked totally real. A producer said Johnny had no idea this was coming. He looked at the control room totally lost, but instead of getting flustered, he leaned into the joke. Carson, a master of comedy, began responding as if he understood perfectly. He nodded thoughtfully and even threw in some fake German-sounding words of his own. The bit went on for minutes before Arnold finally broke, laughed, and switched to English. So which of these moments was the most out of control? Was Johnny really blindsided by that snake, or was it all just part of the act? Let us know below. Hit like and subscribe for more.